Stared at the boarding pass in my trembling hands, the familiar sick feeling spreading through my stomach like poison. Flight 447 to Denver, not Paris again. There must be some mistake, I whispered to the gate agent, though I already knew there wasn't. The same apologetic smile, the same shrug, the same dismissive tone. I'm sorry, miss, but this is what your parents booked. Denver, not Paris. My phone buzzed with a text from Mom. Safe travels, honey. Have fun at your cousin's wedding in Colorado. Cousin's wedding. Not my dream graduation trip to Paris. Not the celebration I'd earned after 4 years of perfect grades. Just another family obligation I'd been voluntarily conscripted into without my knowledge or consent. 24 years old and I was still being treated like a child who couldn't make her own decisions. The rage built in my chest. Hot and familiar. But this time, something was different. This time, I remembered. I remembered this exact moment. The fluorescent airport lights, the scratchy blue carpet, the announcer calling for boarding. I remembered the tears, the argument with Mom that followed, the miserable weekend in Denver pretending to be happy for a cousin I barely knew. I remember dying 3 years later in a car accident. Filled with regrets about all the dreams I'd never chased. I was back. Somehow, impossibly, I was back. And this time, things were going to be different. I deleted Mom's text without responding and walked calmly to the airline customer service desk. The line was 20 people deep, filled with frustrated travelers waving boarding passes and checking their watches. I pulled out my phone and opened an app I'd downloaded, but never used in my first life. One I'd always been too scared to actually tap. Blade Private Jet Booking. My finger hovered over the screen. In my first life, I'd been too responsible, too worried about money, too concerned with what my parents would think. I'd had a trust fund from my grandmother that I'd never touched, saving it for someday in emergencies. Well, this was an emergency. An emergency of the soul. I selected a G650 departing in 2 hours. Destination, Paris. Cost $47,000. I hit confirm before I could change my mind. The confirmation email arrived instantly along with instructions to proceed to the private aviation terminal. I shouldered my carry-on and walked past the long customer service line, past the boarding gate for Denver, past my old life. My phone rang. Mom. Hi, sweetie. I just wanted to make sure you got checked in. Okay. Was there any confusion about the flights? I know the booking website was acting up when your father and I. There was no confusion, Mom, I said, my voice surprisingly steady. You booked me a flight to Denver instead of Paris, just like you always do. Silence, then. Honey, what are you talking about? We discussed this. Sarah's wedding is this weekend, and family comes first. Paris will always be there. Will it? I asked, thinking of the accident that cut my first life short. Will I? You're being dramatic. This is just a little detour. You can go to Paris anytime. I stopped walking and closed my eyes, remembering every time she'd said those exact words. When I wanted to study abroad in college, maybe next semester. When I got a job offer in London, but we'll miss you. When I talked about traveling after graduation. Don't you want to be close to family? I'm going to Paris, Mom, I said quietly. I'm already at the airport and I'm getting on a plane to Paris. But the ticket, I booked my own flight. Another pause, longer this time. I could practically hear her recalibrating, switching from confusion to control. Well, that's wasteful. We already paid for Denver, and Sarah will be so disappointed if you're not there. Sarah, the cousin who'd gotten married 3 more times in my first life, each wedding more elaborate than the last. Sarah, who'd barely spoken to me at family gatherings. Sarah, who'd posted about her perfect wedding day on social media without mentioning any of the family members who'd traveled to be there. Sarah will survive, I said, surprising myself with a sharpness in my voice. I don't understand this attitude. This isn't like you. She was right. It wasn't like the old me. The old me would have trudged onto that Denver flight, spent 3 days making small talk with relatives I saw once a year, and returned home with nothing but photos of someone else's happiness. The old me died with dreams locked away in her heart. Maybe it's exactly like me, I said. Maybe you just never bothered to find out. I hung up before she could respond. The private aviation terminal was a world away from the chaos of the main airport. Marble floors, leather seating, and the kind of hushed efficiency that comes with serious money. I felt underdressed in my jeans and NYU sweatshirt, but the staff treated me like royalty anyway. Miss Chin, a woman in a crisp uniform, approached with a tablet. I'm Jennifer, your flight coordinator. Your aircraft is ready for departure whenever you are. Can I get you anything while we complete the final preparations? Champagne, I said impulsively. The good stuff. She smiled. Of course, Don Perry. I nodded, not trusting my voice. In my first life, I'd never felt worthy of the good stuff. Always saving it for special occasions that never came. Always settling for whatever was practical or convenient. But dying had taught me something crucial. Every moment you're alive is the special occasion. The champagne arrived in a crystal flute, bubbles dancing in the golden liquid. I took a sip and felt it fizz on my tongue, tasting like freedom and possibility. My phone buzzed with increasingly frantic texts from various family members. Mom had clearly activated the emergency phone tree. Dad, what's this about Paris? Call me. Aunt Linda, your mother is worried sick. This isn't like you. Cousin Mark, heard you're having some kind of breakdown. Want to talk? Breakdown? As if choosing my own happiness over their expectations was a sign of mental illness. I turned my phone to airplane mode and savored the sudden silence. Miss Chin, Jennifer returned. We're ready for you. I followed her through sliding glass doors onto the tarmac where a sleek white jet waited like a promise. The late afternoon sun painted everything golden, and for a moment, I just stood there breathing in the reality of it. I was actually doing this. I was actually choosing myself. The flight attendant, Marcus, greeted me with a warm smile and showed me to a seat that was more like a leather armchair than anything you'd find on a commercial flight. First time flying private? He asked, noting my obvious awe. First time doing a lot of things, I admitted. As we taxied for takeoff, I pressed my face to the window and watched my old life grow smaller below. Somewhere down there was the gate where I should have been boarding a flight to Denver. Somewhere down there was the version of me who always said yes to other people's plans. But I was up here now, 38,000 feet above my own fears. I must have dozed off somewhere over the Atlantic because I woke to Marcus gently shaking my shoulder. Miss Chin, we'll be landing in Paris in about an hour. Would you like some breakfast? Breakfast? Paris. For a moment, I felt disoriented, like I was living in someone else's dream. But the taste of champagne was still faint on my tongue, and the sunrise painting the clouds pink outside my window was undeniably real. Yes, please, I said, my voice thick with sleep and wonder. He brought me fresh croissants that flaked to the touch, perfectly ripe strawberries, and coffee that made the airline version taste like dirty water. I ate slowly, savoring every bite, watching the French countryside emerge from the morning mist below. My phone had 17 missed calls and 43 unread messages. I scrolled through them, marveling at the escalation. Mom, this is ridiculous. You're being selfish. Mom, your father had to take blood pressure medication because of this. Mom, how could you waste money like this? Do you know how much private jets cost? Mom, I called Dr. Peterson. He said stress can cause irrational behavior. Mom, we're canceling your credit cards until you come to your senses. That last one made me laugh out loud. Canceling credit cards I paid for myself with money from a job they disapproved of because it wasn't stable enough. The job I'd left to pursue the dream internship at the Louvre that I'd turned down in my first life because they convinced me it was impractical. I typed back, I'm an adult with my own money. Also, I'll be unreachable for the next few weeks. Please don't involve law enforcement unless I'm actually missing for more than a month. Then I blocked all their numbers. The plane touched down at Reborn with the whisper soft landing that comes with professional pilots and unlimited budgets. As we taxied to the private terminal, I felt something I'd never experienced before. The complete absence of obligation. No one expected me anywhere. No one was waiting with an itinerary I hadn't chosen. For the first time in my life, I was truly free. Miss Chin. Marcus appeared with my small suitcase. Your car is waiting. Car? I didn't arrange for a car. He smiled. Compliment service. Part of the flight package. Where would you like to go? I stared at him blankly. In all my fantasies about Paris, I'd never gotten past the part where I actually arrived. I don't have a hotel reservation. The Ritz, he suggested the George V. I can call ahead if you'd like. The Ritz. The George V. Names that existed in my imagination alongside fairy tales and lottery winnings. Places for other people, not for responsible girls who saved money and followed other people's plans. The Ritz, I heard myself say. 40 minutes later, I was standing in the lobby of the Ritz Paris, trying not to gawk like the tourist I absolutely was. Crystal chandeliers, marble columns, and an air of effortless elegance that made my jeans and sweatshirt feel like a costume from the wrong play. Mademoiselle Chen. The concierge approached with a welcoming smile. We have a suite prepared for you. How long will you be staying with us? I don't know, I admitted. Is that okay? May we of course take all the time you need? My suite overlooked the Place Vendôme. All silk wallpaper and antique furniture and windows that framed the city like a painting. I dropped my suitcase and walked to the window, pressing my palms against the cool glass. Paris. I was actually in Paris. My reflection stared back at me, translucent against the afternoon light. I looked the same as always. Shoulder-length black hair, brown eyes behind glasses, small and unremarkable. But something was different. There was a lightness in my expression I'd never seen before. Like a weight had been lifted that I hadn't even realized I'd been carrying. I pulled out my phone and before I could second-guess myself, posted a photo to Instagram. The view from my window, the Parisian rooftop stretching into the distance. The caption was simple. Finally. Within minutes, the comments started pouring in. Jessica, college roommate. OMG, I thought you were going to Denver. Amy, work friend. Did you win the lottery? The Ritz? Random acquaintances, goals, living your best life. So jealous. But buried among the excitement and envy were the concerned voices of family friends. Mrs. Patterson, family friend. Honey, your mother is beside herself. Maybe call home. Uncle Robert, your parents are worried sick. What's going on? I almost felt guilty. Almost. But then I remembered my grandmother's funeral in my first life. How Mom had spent the entire service complaining about the cost of my black dress. How she'd made my grief about her budget. How she convinced me to return the one expensive thing Grandma had left me, a vintage Cartier watch, because it was too flashy and I should think about the less fortunate. The watch that would have paid for this entire trip. I turned my phone face down and ordered room service. That evening, I wandered the streets of Paris with no destination in mind. The city was everything I'd dreamed and nothing like I'd expected. It smelled like cigarettes and fresh bread and expensive perfume. The light was golden and forgiving, making everyone look like they belonged in a magazine. The sound of French conversation flowed around me like music. I found myself on the Pont Alexandre III as the sun was setting, the sand reflecting the sky in shades of pink and gold. Couples walked hand in hand. Tourists took selfies. Street musicians played violin. It was a cliché, but it was my cliché chosen and experienced on my own terms. Excuse me, a voice said in accented English behind me. You dropped this. I turned to find a man holding my phone which had apparently slipped from my pocket. He was tall and dark-haired with the kind of effortless style that screamed Parisian. Worn leather jacket, perfectly imperfect stubble, eyes the color of strong coffee. Oh, I said suddenly aware of my tourist attire. Thank you. American, he asked with a smile. Is it that obvious? The shoes, he said, glancing down at my practical walking sneakers. Very sensible, very American. I laughed despite myself. I'm Lily Antoine. He extended his hand and when I shook it, I noticed he had paint under his fingernails. You are here alone. Yes, I said, and the word felt like a victory. Bold, he said approvingly. Most tourists travel in packs like frightened sheep. You are not a frightened sheep. Not anymore, I agreed. We talked for an hour as the lights came on across the city. He was an artist, he told me, struggling but passionate, living in a tiny studio in Montmartre and painting the city he loved. He asked what brought me to Paris, and I found myself telling him about the graduation trip I dreamed of, the family obligation I'd escaped, the life I was choosing for myself. "And your family?" he asked. "They are angry, furious," I said. "They think I've lost my mind." "Perhaps you have," he said thoughtfully. "Perhaps losing your mind is exactly what you needed." When he asked if I'd like to get dinner, I almost said no. The old me would have made excuses, worried about safety and strangers and what people would think. But the old me was dead. "Yes," I said. "I'd like that very much." He took me to a tiny bistro in the 6th Random, the kind of place tourists never find. We sat at a table barely big enough for 2 plates and shared wine that tasted like it had been made by angels. He told me stories about the city, about the artists and writers who'd walked these same streets, about the revolution and romance and dreams that lived in every corner. "You are different," he said as we shared a chocolate soul that defied physics with its perfection. "Different how?" "American women in Paris, they often have this desperation, like they are trying to prove something. You are calm, present, like you belong here." "Maybe I do," I said, surprising myself. We kissed goodnight outside my hotel, a soft, tentative thing that tasted like wine and possibility. As I rode the elevator to my suite, I caught my reflection in the mirrored walls. My cheeks were flushed, my eyes bright, my smile genuine. I looked like a woman living her own life. Over the next week, I fell in love with everything, with the city, with the freedom, with the version of myself I was discovering. I visited the Laura and spent 6 hours wandering the halls, not because I had to, but because I wanted to. I took a cooking class and learned to make perfect macarons. I bought ridiculously expensive lingerie just because it made me feel beautiful. Antoine became my guide to the real Paris, showing me hidden gardens and late-night jazz clubs and the places where locals went to escape the tourist crowds. We talked about art and dreams and the courage it takes to choose an uncertain path over a safe one. "Your family," he said one afternoon as we walked through the Marché de Rouge. "Have you spoken to them?" I'd been avoiding the question for days. My phone showed dozens of missed calls, hundreds of unread messages. I'd glimpsed enough to know the narrative had shifted from worry to anger to something approaching grief. "They think I'm having a breakdown," I said. "Are you?" I considered this as we stopped at a stall selling the most beautiful strawberries I'd ever seen. "Maybe, but if this is a breakdown, I never want to be whole again." He bought me a box of strawberries, and we ate them as we walked, the juice running down our fingers, sweet and perfect in the afternoon sun. That night in his tiny studio apartment with its slanted ceilings and view of Sacre, we made love for the first time. It was nothing like my previous experiences. No negotiation or compromise or worry about expectations. It was just desire, pure and simple, chosen freely and given gladly. Afterward, as we lay tangled in his sheets, listening to the sounds of the city below, he traced patterns on my bare shoulder with his fingertip. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "My grandmother," I said, which wasn't what either of us expected. "She used to tell me stories about Paris. She came here as a young woman during the war. She said it changed her, made her brave. And now I understand what she meant." The call came at 3 a.m. Paris time. My phone, which I'd finally turned back on, buzzed insistently on the nightstand. Antoine stirred beside me, but didn't wake. I grabbed the phone and saw my father's number. "Hello," I whispered, slipping into the tiny bathroom so I wouldn't disturb Antoine. "Lily, thank God." Dad's voice was rough with exhaustion and relief. "We've been so worried. Your mother hasn't slept in days." The guilt hit me like a physical blow. I'd been so focused on my own liberation that I'd forgotten they might actually be suffering. These were the people who'd raised me, loved me, worried about my future. Maybe I'd been too harsh. "I'm okay, Dad. I'm safe." "I've just been. You need to come home," he interrupted. "Now, tonight, I've already looked into flights. There's a red-eye that gets you back tomorrow morning." The command in his voice snapped me back to reality. Not relief that I was safe, not curiosity about my adventure. Just an order to return to the life they'd planned for me. "No," I said quietly. "What do you mean no?" I mean, I'm not coming home. Not yet. A long pause then. Lily, this has gone far enough. You've made your point. You're an adult and you can make your own decisions. We get it. But you can't just disappear and spend money like it's water and act like your family doesn't matter. Like my dreams don't matter, I countered. Dreams don't pay bills. Dreams don't build a stable life. Dreams are for children. I thought of Antoine sleeping in the next room, paint-stained fingers and passionate eyes in a tiny apartment filled with canvases. I thought of the galleries and ateliers I'd visited filled with people who'd chosen uncertainty over security, art over comfort. Maybe, I said, but I'm not ready to stop being a child. You're being ridiculous. I'm being free. Another long pause. When he spoke again, his voice was different, harder. Your grandmother's trust fund. We've been talking to the lawyers. There might be ways to restrict access. If you're not making sound decisions, the threat hung in the air between us, cold and clear. Come home and be the daughter we want or lose the financial independence that made this freedom possible. I thought of my first life, of all the dreams I'd deferred and the chances I'd missed, because I was too afraid of losing their approval. I thought of dying with regrets. Wishing I'd been braver. Do what you think is best, Dad, I said. I'm doing what I know is right. I hung up and sat in the tiny bathroom shaking. Through the thin walls, I could hear Antoine's steady breathing, the normal sounds of a man sleeping peacefully while his world remained intact. I envied him that peace, but when I crept back into bed, he stirred and pulled me against him, his arms warm and strong around me. Everything okay? He murmured into my hair. I think I just cut the last rope, I whispered. Does it feel like falling or flying? I considered this both. The next morning brought an email that changed everything. The subject line was simple. Opportunity Live Internship Program. I almost deleted it, assuming it was spam or some kind of cruel joke. But something made me open it. Scan the professional letterhead and formal language. It was real. The Louvre was launching a new international internship program for recent graduates. 6 months in Paris, working with their digital archives team. Full salary and housing provided. Applications were due in 3 days. I stared at the screen, my coffee growing cold in my hands. This was impossible. This was perfect. This was everything I dreamed of in my first life. But had been too afraid to pursue. Good news, Antoine asked, reading my expression. I showed him the email. He read it twice, his eyebrows rising higher with each line. This is incredible. You must apply. I don't have the qualifications they want. I studied art history, but my internships were all at small galleries. I don't have museum experience. So, the worst they can say is no. And then you are exactly where you are now, which is not so terrible. Yes, he was right. What did I have to lose? I'd already lost my family's approval. Probably their financial support. Certainly my place in their carefully ordered world. But I'd gained something, too. The knowledge that I could survive on my own, that I could choose my own path and walk it without permission. I spent the day crafting my application, pouring everything I had into the personal statement. I wrote about art as a bridge between cultures, about the importance of making history accessible to new generations. About my grandmother's stories of wartime Paris and how they'd shaped my understanding of resilience and beauty. I wrote about choosing courage over comfort, about the trip that had already changed my life. Antoine helped me translate some sections into French, his artist's eye catching nuances I'd missed. We worked together at a cafe near his studio, my laptop between us, stealing kisses over coffee and arguing about word choices with the passion of people who care about getting it right. There, I said finally, my finger hovering over the submit button. It's done. Wait, he reached across the table and took my hand. Before you send it, are you sure this is what you want? The question surprised me. Of course, why wouldn't I be? Because if you get this job, you will stay for 6 months, maybe longer. You will build a life here and your family. We'll have to accept it or they will disown you completely. I thought about this. In my first life, I'd been so afraid of their disappointment, so dependent on their approval, that I'd shaped my entire existence around their expectations. I'd taken the safe job, dated the approved boyfriend, lived in the acceptable apartment, and I died with a heart full of what-ifs. Then they'll disown me, I said, and hit submit. The response came faster than I dared hope. 3 days later, as I was wandering through the Musée d'Orsay, my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. Mademoiselle Chin, this is Dr. Marie Dubois from the Louvre. We have reviewed your application for the Digital Archives internship. My heart stopped. Yes. We would like to invite you for an interview. Are you available tomorrow at 2 o'clock? I was so shocked I nearly dropped my phone. Yes. Yes, absolutely. Excellent. Please bring a portfolio of any relevant work and be prepared to discuss your experience with digital preservation techniques. Digital preservation techniques. I had approximately 16 hours to become an expert in digital preservation techniques. I spent the night in my hotel room, surrounded by printouts and laptop screens, cramming like I'd never crammed for any exam. Antoine brought me coffee and croissants, quizzed me on terminology, helped me practice explaining complex concepts in simple terms. You know this material, he insisted as I panicked over a particularly dense article about metadata standards. You have been living with art history for 4 years. Trust yourself. The interview was terrifying and exhilarating. Dr. Dubois was an elegant woman in her 50s who asked probing questions about everything from Renaissance pigments to contemporary copyright law. I answered as honestly as I could, admitting when I didn't know something, but explaining how I would go about learning it. Why Paris? She asked finally. Why not a position in New York or London or Los Angeles? I thought of my grandmother's stories, of Antoine's paint-stained fingers, of the way the light looked different here, softer and more forgiving. Because Paris taught me who I am, I said, and I want to give something back to the city that gave me myself. She smiled for the first time in the interview. When can you start? I called Antoine from the steps of the Louvre, tears streaming down my face. I got it, I sobbed into the phone. I actually got it. Of course you did, he said, and I could hear the smile in his voice. Where are you? I'm coming to celebrate. We met at our bistro in the 6th, the one where we'd had our first dinner. The owner, who'd gotten used to seeing us together, brought champagne without being asked. As we toasted my new job, my new life, my new everything, I felt a lightness I'd never experienced before. I have to call my parents, I said eventually, the thought sobering me. Do you want me to come with you? No, this is something I need to do alone. I walked to the Seine, finding the same spot on the Pont Alexandre III where Antoine and I had first met. The city lights reflected in the water, and I could hear music drifting from a nearby restaurant. I dialed my mother's number. She answered on the first ring. Lily, oh, thank God. Are you finally ready to come home? Mom, I said gently. I got a job at the Louvre. I'm staying in Paris. The silence stretched so long I thought she'd hung up. Then for how long? 6 months to start, maybe longer after that. This is ridiculous. You can't just abandon your life, your family, your responsibilities. I'm not abandoning anything. I'm choosing something. What about the apartment we put a deposit on? What about the job interview I set up for you with Jennifer's firm? I closed my eyes. The apartment I'd never seen. The job I'd never applied for. The life planned without my input. Mom, I never asked for any of that. You never had to ask. We're your parents. It's our job to look out for your future. And it's my job to live it. Another long pause. When she spoke again, her voice was thick with tears. I don't understand what happened to you. You were such a good daughter. The words hit me like a physical blow. We're past tense. As if becoming my own person had made me a failure as a daughter. I'm still a good daughter, I said. I'm just also a good person, and sometimes those things conflict. Your father is talking to the lawyers about the trust fund. I know you could lose everything or I could gain everything that matters. I heard her take a shaky breath. Will you call? Let us know you're okay. Of course. But Mom, I need you to understand something. I'm not coming back because you want me to. I'm not going to live my life according to your fears. I love you, but I love myself too. And for the first time, I'm choosing myself. I don't know how to accept that. Then learn, I said gently, because this is who I am now. 3 months later, I was sitting in my new apartment in the 11th Arrondissement mall, a tiny one-bedroom with creaky floors and windows that looked out onto a courtyard filled with cats. It was nothing like the pristine places my parents had always insisted on, and it was absolutely perfect. My job at the Loo was everything I dreamed and more challenging than I'd imagined. I spent my days working with centuries-old manuscripts and cutting-edge technology, helping to preserve art for future generations. My colleagues were brilliant and passionate, and they'd accepted me as one of their own. Antoine had moved in with me the month before, bringing his easel and his chaos and his incredible ability to make even the mundane magical. His latest painting, a view of our courtyard at sunset, hung above our bed like a window into his heart. My phone rang, interrupting my thoughts. Unknown number, American area code. Hello, Lily. It's Amy from work. Your old work. Amy, my former colleague, one of the few people who'd seemed genuinely excited about my Paris adventure. Amy, how are you? I'm good. Listen, I hope you don't mind me calling. I got your number from Jessica. I wanted to tell you something. What's wrong? Nothing's wrong. It's just your cousin Sarah's wedding, the one in Denver. It was a disaster. I sat up straighter. What? What happened? Apparently, the groom got caught with one of the bridesmaids the night before the ceremony. Sarah called everything off, but not before your family had spent thousands on travel and hotels. Your mom was apparently telling everyone that if you'd been there, you could have kept an eye on things, maybe prevented it. I almost laughed. Even in disaster, it was somehow my fault for not being there. But that's not why I'm calling, Amy continued. I'm calling because I saw your Instagram, the museum stuff, the art, your boyfriend who looks like he stepped out of a French movie. You look happy. Really genuinely happy. And I wanted to tell you that some of us here are inspired by what you did. Inspired? Yeah. Jennifer quit her corporate job to travel. Mark finally asked out that guy he's been crushing on for years. Even I'm thinking about taking that photography class I've been putting off. She paused. You showed us that it's possible to just choose differently. After we hung up, I sat in my small kitchen drinking tea and thinking about choices. In my first life, I died thinking it was too late to change. Too late to choose myself over other people's expectations. But it's never too late. Every moment is a choice. Every day is a chance to be brave. My laptop chimed with an email. The subject line made my heart skip. Trust fund. Important update. I opened it, expecting the worst. My father's lawyer informing me that my access had been revoked, that my financial independence was over. Instead, it was from a different law firm entirely, a firm I'd never heard of. Dear Miss Chen, we represent the estate of Mrs. Eleanor Chen, your grandmother. We have recently become aware of attempts to restrict your access to the trust fund she established for your benefit. Mrs. Chen included specific provisions to prevent such restrictions, anticipating that family members might attempt to use financial pressure to control your choices. Please be advised that the trust is irrevocable and cannot be modified by anyone other than you. Additionally, Mrs. Chen included a provision that if any family member attempts to interfere with the trust, an additional sum of $500,000 becomes immediately available to you for living expenses. We have been monitoring the situation and can confirm that such interference has occurred. The additional funds have been deposited into your account. Your grandmother included a letter to be delivered in the event this provision was triggered. We have attached it here. Sincerely, Morrison Banks and Associates. With shaking hands, I opened the attachment. Grandma's handwriting, spidery but strong, filled the page. My dearest Lily, if you are reading this, it means you have chosen to disappoint your parents. Good for you. I spent too many years being the daughter, wife, and mother that others expected me to be. I don't want that life for you. I want you to be brave, to be selfish, to chase dreams that make no sense to anyone but you. Your parents mean well, but they are afraid of the world and want to make you afraid, too. Don't let them. Be bold. Be ridiculous. Be gloriously, unapologetically yourself. I was young in Paris once during the war. It was the most terrifying and wonderful time of my life. I met your grandfather there. Fell in love with him and with myself and with the idea that life could be an adventure instead of an obligation. I hope you find your own Paris wherever it may be. All my love and admiration of Grandma. I cried until Antoine came home and found me sobbing in the kitchen, laptop open to Grandma's letter. He read it over my shoulder, his arms warm around me. She sounds like a wise woman, he said. She was. I just wish I'd been brave enough to listen to her stories when she was alive. Maybe you weren't ready then. Maybe you needed to live a little first to understand what she meant. That evening, I called my parents. Dad answered, his voice cautious. Lily. Hi, Dad. I got a call from Grandma's lawyers today. A long pause. About the trust fund. About your attempt to control it? Yes. I kept my voice level, calm. And about the additional money that's now available because of that attempt, Lily, we were just trying to force me to come home by cutting off my financial independence. I know. I walked to the window, looking out at the courtyard where Antoine was setting up his easel in the last light of day. But here's the thing, Dad. Even if you'd succeeded, even if you'd taken away every penny, I still wouldn't have come home. You would have had to. You couldn't survive on your own. I was surviving just fine. I had a job, an apartment, a life I'd built myself. The money just made it more comfortable. I paused, gathering my courage for what I needed to say next. But the real reason I wouldn't have come home is that I'm not the same person who left. The daughter you're trying to control doesn't exist anymore. People don't just change overnight, Lily. No, I agreed. They change over years of being told their dreams don't matter. They change when they realize they've been living someone else's life. They change when they finally get brave enough to choose themselves. Mom's voice came on the line. She must have picked up the extension. So what now? We just lose our daughter forever. The pain in her voice almost broke my resolve. Almost. You don't lose me, I said softly. But you have to let me go. You have to accept that I'm an adult making adult choices, even if they're not the choices you would make. And if we can't, I closed my eyes, thinking of my first life, of all the years I'd spent trying to earn approval that came with conditions. Love that depended on my compliance. Then you've already lost me, I said. The question is whether you want to get to know who I really am or whether you'd rather mourn the daughter who never really existed. 6 months later, they came to Paris. I met them at Charles de Gaulle, nervous in a way I hadn't been since my Lou interview. They looked smaller somehow, older, Dad's hair grayer, and Mom's smile more tentative. They'd aged in the months since I'd left. And I wondered if I'd aged, too, in ways that weren't visible. You look good, Mom said after we'd exchanged awkward hugs. Happy. I am happy. The ride into the city was tense, filled with careful small talk about the weather and the flight. But I caught Dad staring out the window at the tree-lined boulevards, his expression thoughtful, and Mom taking photos with her phone when she thought I wasn't looking. I'd planned their visit carefully. A nice hotel in the 7th, close enough to visit, but far enough away to maintain boundaries. Dinner reservations at restaurants that would impress without being too intimidating. A carefully curated tour of my life that would show them the best parts without overwhelming them. But plans I'd learned rarely survive contact with reality. The first surprise came when we arrived at their hotel. Dad looked at the elegant facade, the uniformed doorman, the marble lobby visible through glass doors. This is too expensive, he said immediately. We'll find somewhere cheaper. I'm paying for it. I said it's my gift to you. We can't let you. Yes, you can. I looked at both of them. These people who'd raised me and loved me and tried to control me in equal measure. I'm doing well here. I can afford to treat my parents to a nice hotel. Let me. Mom's eyes filled with tears. We just don't want you to think you have to buy our approval. I don't, I said gently. I stopped needing your approval months ago. This is just me wanting to share my happiness with you. The second surprise came that evening at dinner. I'd chosen a small bistro in Seine, intimate and quintessentially Parisian. Antoine was meeting us there, and I was terrified about how that would go. He arrived exactly on time, dressed in his best clothes, but still unmistakably himself. Paint under his nails, hair slightly messy, eyes bright with nervous energy. He kissed me softly before turning to my parents with a warm smile. "Monsieur and Madame Chen," he said, his English careful but correct. "It is such a pleasure to meet you. Lily speaks of you often." Dad stood to shake his hand, and I held my breath. But instead of the cold politeness I'd expected, Dad's expression was curious, almost friendly. "Antoine, right? Lily tells us you're an artist." Yes, I paint mostly the city, people, life as it happens," he gestured eloquently, and I could see my parents trying to reconcile this passionate, articulate man with whatever they'd imagined. "Is it profitable?" Mom asked, then immediately looked embarrassed by the question. Antoine laughed, not offended. "Not very, no. But Lily, she helps me see that maybe profit is not the only measure of success. Maybe happiness matters, too." The dinner went better than I'd dared hope. Antoine charmed them with stories about Paris, about art, about the history of the neighborhood we were sitting in. He asked thoughtful questions about their work, their life in America, their hopes for retirement. By the end of the evening, Mom was showing him pictures on her phone, and Dad was asking about his paintings. The third surprise came the next day when I took them to the Louvre. I'd arranged a private tour through my department, wanting them to see not just the museum, but my place in it. Dr. Dubois met us at the staff entrance, elegant and professional as always. "Your daughter," she told my parents as we walked through corridors most visitors never see, "is exceptional. Her work on our digital preservation project has been revolutionary. We are hoping she will consider making her position permanent." I saw my parents exchange glances. They hadn't known about the permanent position offer. I hadn't told them because I hadn't decided what to answer. We ended the tour in my office, a small space filled with computer monitors and artifacts waiting to be digitized. I showed them the manuscript I was currently working on, a 15th-century illuminated book of ours that had been damaged in a fire decades ago. "We're using new imaging techniques to reveal text that was thought to be lost forever," I explained, pulling up before and after images on my screen. "See here?" This line of text was completely invisible to the naked eye. But the multispectral imaging revealed it. Dad leaned closer, studying the screen. "You're bringing back something that was thought to be gone." "Exactly." He was quiet for a long moment. "Then that's important work." "It is." Mom was looking around my office, taking in the certificates on the wall, the projects scattered across my desk, the photo of Antoine and me at a gallery opening. "You built this," she said finally. "This life, this career, this everything. You built it yourself." "Yes, I'm proud of you," she said and started crying. The fourth surprise came that evening when they insisted on taking Antoine and me to dinner. Dad had researched restaurants. Mom had practiced pronouncing French words. They were trying, really trying to understand my world. Over wine and perfectly prepared duck confit. The conversation turned to the future. "So," Dad said carefully, "this permanent position, are you going to take it?" I glanced at Antoine, who squeezed my hand under the table. "I don't know yet. There are things to consider." "Like what?" "Like whether I want to stay in Paris forever, like what that would mean for visits home, for family, for." I trailed off, not sure how to finish. "For us," Mom said quietly. "You're wondering what it would mean for us." "Partly?" "Yes." She and Dad looked at each other, having one of those silent conversations that long married couples master. "Lily," Dad said finally, "we've made mistakes. We tried to hold on too tight. Tried to keep you in a life that made sense to us, but not to you. We were scared of losing you, and we almost lost you because of that fear. You're our only child," Mom added. "We put all our hopes and fears and dreams on your shoulders, and that wasn't fair. We want you to be happy," Dad continued. "Even if that happiness is in a place we don't understand, with a life we never imagined for you." I felt tears starting to fall. "You mean that?" "We mean it," Mom said firmly. "Take the job if you want it. Stay in Paris if it makes you happy. We'll learn to love visiting. God knows Antoine has convinced your father that French wine is superior to anything we can get at home." Antoine laughed, raising his glass to superior wine and superior daughters who know their own minds. We toasted, and for the first time since I'd made my escape to Paris, I felt like my family was truly whole. The final surprise came on their last day when Dad pulled me aside for a private conversation. We were walking along the Seine, Mom and Antoine a few steps ahead, deep in conversation about something that was making them both laugh. "Your grandmother would be proud," he said suddenly. I looked at him in surprise. "You knew about her letter?" I suspected. "She always said you had more of her spirit than anyone realized. She used to tell me stories about her time in Paris during the war, about the choices she made, the risks she took." He smiled sadly. "I think I spent so many years trying to keep you safe that I forgot safety isn't the same as living." "Dad, no, let me finish. I've been thinking about this for months, ever since you left. Your mother and I, we built a good life, a stable life, but we built it by avoiding risks, by choosing security over adventure. We wanted that for you because we thought it would make you happy. It might have made someone else happy," I said. "Just not me. I'm starting to understand that." He stopped walking, turning to face me fully. "I want you to know that I'm proud of you. Not just for what you've accomplished here, but for having the courage to disappoint us. It took bravery to choose yourself over our expectations. It was the hardest thing I've ever done. The best things usually are." We stood there for a moment watching a bateau mouche drift by on the river filled with tourists taking photos of the city I now called home. "The trust fund," Dad said, "eventually the additional money from your grandmother's provision. We're not going to contest it. It's yours. All of it. Use it however you want." "Thank you. There's one more thing." He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small wrapped box. "This was your grandmother's. We were supposed to give it to you on your wedding day, but well, I think she would want you to have it now." Inside the box was the Cartier watch Mom had convinced me to return in my first life. The one I'd sold to pay for the funeral expenses. The one I'd regretted losing every day since. She left specific instructions. Dad continued, said it was for when you finally became yourself, not who we wanted you to be. I fastened the watch around my wrist with shaking fingers. It fit perfectly, like it had been waiting for me all along. 2 years later, I was standing in a small gallery in Mon watching art lovers examine Antoine's latest collection. The show was called Reborn, and every painting told a story of transformation, of choosing courage over comfort. The centerpiece was a portrait of me on that first night in Paris, standing on the Pont Alexandre III with the city lights reflected in the Seine behind me. He'd painted me from memory, capturing something I hadn't even known was visible, the exact moment when I'd stopped being afraid and started being alive. "It's magnificent," a voice said behind me. I turned to find Dr. Dubois, elegant as always, studying the painting with professional appreciation. "He captured something essential," she continued. "The moment of becoming. That's what it felt like." I agreed. Like I was becoming myself for the first time. And now, no regrets about staying. I looked around the gallery at Antoine greeting guests with passionate enthusiasm. At the friends I'd made in my new life, at my parents, who'd flown in for the opening and were gamely attempting to discuss art in broken French. "No regrets," I said firmly. The official announcement about my promotion to senior digital curator had come that morning. It was a permanent position, one that would let me shape the future of digital preservation at one of the world's great museums. More importantly, it was work that mattered, work that fed my soul, as well as my bank account. My phone buzzed with a text from my cousin Sarah, who'd remarried the year before. This time to a man who actually showed up for his own wedding. "Saw the article about your promotion in Art News. So proud of you. P.S. Thank you for not coming to my first wedding. It was a disaster and you definitely would have tried to talk sense into me, which I wouldn't have listened to anyway. Sometimes we have to make our own mistakes to learn our own lessons." I laughed, showing the text to Antoine as he joined me in front of his painting. "She's right, you know," he said, wrapping his arms around me from behind. "Sometimes the best thing you can do for someone is let them find their own way, even if it means disappointing them." Especially then, I leaned back against him, watching my parents attempt to discuss expressionism with a French art critic. They looked happy, engaged, proud to be here, even if they didn't understand everything they were seeing. "I've been thinking," I said. What? About the future, about choices. I turned in his arms to face him. About what I want to build with you. His eyes lit up with understanding. And what do you want to build? Everything, I said. A life, a family, a future that we choose together. Not because anyone expects it of us, but because it's what we want. He kissed me then, soft and sure, and I tasted possibility on his lips. Yes, he murmured against my mouth. Let's build everything. Later that night, after the gallery had closed and the guests had gone home, and my parents had returned to their hotel with promises to visit again soon, Antoine and I walked home through the streets of Montmartre. The city was quiet, bathed in the golden glow of street lights, beautiful in the way that only Paris at midnight can be. Do you ever wonder, he asked as we climbed the stairs to our apartment, what would have happened if you had gotten on that flight to Denver? I thought about it seriously, imagining that other life, that other me, the weekend of family obligations and forced smiles, the return to a life that felt too small. The slow suffocation of dreams deferred until they disappeared entirely. I would have died, I said simply. Died? Not literally. Well, maybe literally eventually. But my spirit would have died. The part of me that dreams, that takes risks, that chooses hope over fear, that would have died in that airplane seat somewhere over Kansas. We reached our door and Antoine fumbled for his keys in the dim hallway light. Our apartment was small and imperfect and absolutely perfect, filled with his paintings and my books and the life we built together from scratch. I'm glad you chose to live, he said, opening the door and pulling me inside. So am I. I thought of my grandmother's letter, of her stories about being young in Paris during the war, about choosing love over safety, adventure over comfort, life over mere existence. About the importance of being gloriously, unapologetically yourself. I thought of the version of me that had died in a car accident in my first life. Full of regrets and unlived dreams. She would never see Paris, never know Antoine, never discover the work that set her soul on fire. But her sacrifice, her unlived life, had somehow given me this second chance. Thank you, I whispered to the universe. To fate, to whatever force had given me the impossible gift of rebirth and the wisdom to use it well. Tomorrow would bring new choices, new chances to be brave, new opportunities to choose myself over other people's expectations. There would be challenges and setbacks and moments of doubt, but I would face them as myself. Not as the daughter my parents wanted or the woman society expected, but as Lily Chen, digital curator, Parisian, lover of art and life, and the man sleeping beside me. I had learned the most important lesson of any life. It's never too late to choose yourself. Even when it disappoints people you love. Even when it means starting over in a foreign country with nothing but hope and determination. Even when it means letting go of who you were to become who you're meant to be. The last thing I saw before sleep took me was Antoine's latest painting, the one of me on the bridge that first night. In it, I looked like a woman who had just discovered she could fly. And maybe in a way I had. Some people are born knowing who they are. The rest of us have to choose again and again until we get it right. I got it right the day I let my parents book the wrong flight and chose to fly toward my own dreams instead. Paris taught me that the most beautiful journeys begin with the courage to disappoint the people who love you in service of becoming the person you're meant to be. It's a hard lesson, a painful one, but it's the only way to live a life that's truly your own. And in the end, that's all any of us really have. The choices we make and the courage to live with them. I chose Paris. I chose Antoine. I chose myself. I chose to be reborn not as someone else's daughter or employee or expectation, but as simply, unapologetically, gloriously me. It was the best choice I ever made.